legal, and I also consider it a taking, an uncompensated taking of, so I like that. Again, I don't know how long the look-back period will be, but I do like that aspect. And those are just a few of my thoughts on Chapter 9, and I could go on for an hour, so you can see how important I believe that these meetings are, and that it's difficult to comprehend and understand a big bunch of this all at once. So if the committee members, the CSD members have the time and opportunity to attend these meetings, I really think that it's going to benefit the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blaine, I have a question. The speaker brought up Supervisor Arnold's comments, and I've read the comments that were submitted and posted online on the Groundwater Basins page. What is going on in the 5th District? It sounds like there's a lot of nasty political stuff that they're trying to push for this to die. Is that what I'm reading correctly? Because some of the comments seem kind of angry that I read, and you can give the, from what I know historically, they're somewhat going to be anti-many projects.
I think certainly there is there's a position that's held by, it appears to be quite a few people, probably largely made up of the rural the rural property owners that you know, they see, and I think that was Supervisor Arnold's position, was they see really the problem that the basin is in with regard to the groundwater condition of the groundwater basin is really essentially should be all on the backs of the big ag, and it should. The position she was taking is, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, but is, you know, you guys created the problem. You make business decisions to fix the problem. You know? And with regard to projects, she didn't appear to be supportive of certainly any of the state water projects. She was very critical of those. And as far as the other projects, she did not seem to be very supportive of those. But that I heard just, you know, her comments that night. I don't know. I haven't talked to her in person.
That was Supervisor Arnold.
That was Supervisor Arnold. Her position seemed to have been pretty different from Supervisor Sean's position in earlier meetings. And so I think tomorrow is going to be quite enlightening because I think they're both going to be there.
Okay. I'm just going to say this. I do know politically, I know Supervisor Arnold is up for re-election, and it's going to be a contentious election. And I have some concerns that the county may vote to torpedo the plan because of the election in order to make sure they retain their seats. It's a personal opinion of mine, and I think it's something that may need to be considered internally by this community.
Interestingly enough, that was one of the reasons why I requested that we have this meeting, because 2 weeks ago, around 2 weeks ago, I was very concerned that there were things headed, that the plan was headed in a direction that was just untenable to the district. It would have been, where we were going, I don't think it would have, it wouldn't have been acceptable to this district. Since then, there's been some softening in the things, and I'll talk about a couple of those things in a few minutes, but some softening in some of those issues that I think we may find, at this point, we might be able to find a compromise that works for us. Literally 2 weeks ago, I was thinking I'd come to this meeting and go, I think we need to start thinking about just breaking off and doing our own plan. At this point, that's not my recommendation, but I was close a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Okay, let me just kind of go finish up, it's not too far. So one of the big things that and actually I think Director Sangster mentioned it early on, in you read through the draft chapters of the plan, the sustainable management criteria, there's a laundry list of them. I think there's 7 or 8 that apply. One is groundwater level, one's amount of storage in the aquifer, one is groundwater sustainable or sustained ecosystems, some others, subsidence and a few others. The way each one of those management criteria in this plan, the way this plan is written, is basically the proxy for that criteria, or for managing that criteria, is groundwater level. And it makes sense because there just isn't a whole lot of data in this basin to even understand a lot of those other issues. You know, like the groundwater influenced ecosystems. You know, there are certainly areas where, you know, people have said, oh, there's historically been a spring there. And I think we're one of those areas where historically that might have been the case. But for the most part in this basin, groundwater levels are low enough that we're not really seeing groundwater sustained, you know, surface water ecosystems, like springs and stuff like that. So it makes sense, in my opinion at least, to use the groundwater levels for as a proxy for managing all those other criteria. But there are two then, so this is just a little map that shows our 3 supply wells, the terrace well and our 2 main wells on the west side of the river. And then that dot kind of in the middle, that's a monitoring well that the DWR monitors, and it's right over on the other side of the river, right at the other side of the bridge. And that is monitored, it's measured twice a year. That gauge site is online. You can see that water level anytime you want. That well, because there's so few wells in the database that are not subject to privacy restrictions. There's something like only 11 wells in our entire groundwater basin that we can actually look at and go, these are representation points within our basin to make decisions of. And we have to, by the law, establish for each management criteria a measurable objective. That is, where do we want that water level, if that's going to be our measurement point across the river, where do we want that water level to be in the future, 40 years, actually 20 years from now, 2040. And what level are we absolutely not willing to let it fall below? And there are then triggers if it falls below that, penalties, essentially.
But I mean, looking at that reasoning, 1 well is certainly not enough to define the whole area.
That's true.
So if we're working with insufficient data, how does the collective come up with a plan that makes sense for all of the GSAs, and how would we have any idea of what to approve if we have no data? I mean, one well is insignificant.
Absolutely agree. And so that point became, the way the plan a few weeks ago was written, is it was like, there's 11 points, we're gonna use those, and that's it. And we accept, and everybody, the consultants accepted, oh yeah, those are data, there are data gaps, and those will be filled in. And as those data gaps get filled in, maybe the measurable objectives and minimum thresholds will change over time in different areas. But the group finally, the collective staff group said, that's not going to work. So now what's in the plan is that we recognize there's a data gap. And over the next couple of years, we need to start filling in that data gap. So each GSA has an obligation under the plan as it's drafted right now to go in their areas, fill those data gaps in. Lucky for us, we don't have a huge footprint, and we do have wells that are currently our own wells, in fact, currently subject to a privacy restriction. We did voluntarily make those available to add into the database for this plan, our 3 wells. But there are others within, Kelly and I have spent some time, and there are others within our footprint that we think we can bring into the database to get a better understanding of what's going on in our particular area, but the other GSAs have to do the same thing than they do.
These 11 wells, that are being monitored and are being used for this data, where are they located mostly? And are they mostly like, communities wells, or is there any private wells that are being offered up?
There's a few, you know, really my recollection is, I'm just trying to think of the map, you know, certainly the majority of them are, you know, along the western portion of the basin, kind of up along not along the Salinas River, but along kind of, think about the Salinas River corridor.
Yeah.
There's a couple over near the airport, the Paso Airport, or at least one over there. There's one down around Creston, there's one down around Shannon. There's not many, and out in the hinterland of the aquifer, there are few and far between.
Because 6 years ago, there was requests to have the landowners help supply well data for the county's modeling, and they said no. And it sounds like they're still not willing to give that up. Is there anyone even tried approaching private landowners? Are we still? Because it sounds like their position hasn't changed much in 6 years, and I don't think it's going to change overnight. That's my big concern looking at this.
Well, one of the certainly private landowners, I mean, it's still a private property, right? In the state of California, you don't have to divulge that information. But that's part of the, and just in a few minutes, I'll talk about the Tier 1 management actions. The Tier 1 are sort of those carrot ones, right? Low cost or no cost. Let's see what we can accomplish by just kind of working together. Let's all be friends. So that's part of it, is let's reach out, let's expand that network of points of measurement, monitoring wells. Now, the big ag wells, this plan requires that they all be metered, and it requires that they all be monitored. So we're gonna, by default, anything but the non-de minimis wells, if a GSA, and I think we as a GSA are gonna want to say, yes, all those wells are non-de minimis, we may want to, we're gonna wanna meter them all, but we may want to monitor some of them, include some of those in the monitoring network. We will have the right under the SIGMA to do that.
So we'll be able to monitor the Gallo well.
If it's Gallo in our service area? Yeah. Yeah.
That'll be interesting to know that number.
Well, and we've been working on compiling a list of people who may be interested, and we haven't talked to really any of them yet, but from talking to AWOL down the street, that he has plenty of contacts of well owners that he feels would be willing to allow us to monitor their well. Some of them allowing us to monitor their well and publish the data, and some of them probably allow us to monitor for our data, but not for the public record. So that's going to be something that we're going to be pushing harder on to get that information more for our records and everything. But if we can get some that people are willing to put it out there into the public, and these are mainly private wells, but like private homeowner wells, but that would be more data points for us.
Because I'm really curious whether or not these private wells, or the wells that are on our boundaries, pump how much more water than our entire district pumps. I want to know if it's double. I think it might be near double. Would that be a fair estimate?
Are you talking about them all cumulatively?
Yeah.
Well, the district really doesn't pump that much water, so it's entirely possible that all of the larger wells in and around the district pump as much or more than the district.
Yeah, let's see. We ran the numbers of it. Is it, you know, as a per capita or per acre within the footprint of our district, we should be a de minimis user. I tried to sell that so far unsuccessfully.
And in this plan that we're working on, we'll be able to address that and make sure though that we somehow benefit out of this.
Well, at the end of the day, it has to make sense for the district. So whether or not the district is benefiting is kind of debatable, but we can't go into a situation where the entire district is losing to one property owner. So it's going to have to be sustainable for the district and for the property owners within the district and outside the district. So, I mean, we all have to work together. If one of us runs out of water, we're all going to eventually run out of water, so we're going to work together.
I have a couple other questions, but I don't wanna keep jumping around. I just wanna ask one geological question real quick, and that is, why is the San Marcos Creek not listed on the maps that I've seen for this? It lists the Barrow, Dry Creeks, Big Sandy Creek, Salinas River, Estrella, but San Marcos Creek is not a part of that. Why is that?
That's a good question.
Is San Marcos not even being considered in the data in all the modeling, despite the fact that it does flow water just south of our boundaries?
I know, well, the reason Warrero is listed, or is shown, is, and I guess probably elevated to a higher level of consideration, is related to the study that the county did, the recharge study along Warrero Creek. So that data set was incorporated into their consultants' analysis. And then this, Salinas River obviously is included, it's the main one, but there's stream gauges or a stream gauge on Salinas River. The Estrella is included because there's a stream gauge on the Estrella River. But that's a good question. I will have, let me run that one by.
Yeah, because, it does flow water. I know even if it doesn't flow surface water, I think it does flow water under the ground year round. And I don't know if that's been considered at all in modeling, and what kind of changes that would affect at all, if any, to our district's water supply and planning for the future.
I know in the groundwater model, the San Marcos watershed is included.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the reason I know it's included is we see some anomalously high groundwater levels in the area where the San Marcos discharges out into the basin.
Mm-hmm.
So, it shows up in the model, and it also shows up in the groundwater monitoring. In well level data, I don't think there's one of the 11 wells right at that location.
Right. But if we could find out, that would
Sure.
make me feel a little bit better, because when I look at this and I go, where is it?
Yeah, no. Let me get back to you, okay? Okay. Let's see, I think just,